Kieran wiped the sweat from his forehead as he tightened the last bolt on a hovering repair rig. The scorching sun reflected off the red rocks of Zyra's territory, making the desert shimmer like fire. He glanced up and saw her watching from a distance, her golden scales glowing under the sun. Zyra had been his wife for 3 years, but they had never spoken much. Not a word of affection, not a touch, nothing beyond the formality required by law. He had come to this planet as a mechanic, sent to maintain the Dragon Clan's ancient machinery. When he arrived, a ceremonial arrangement had already been made. Marriage to Zyra was mandatory according to her clan's traditions, and though Kieran had agreed out of respect, he had no idea how to live with a dragon woman who remained distant and proud. Every other human had whispered that it would be impossible to earn her trust, let alone affection. Zyra's gaze never left him as he worked. Her wings were folded neatly behind her back, shimmering like burnished gold in the sun. Her eyes, sharp and deep, watched every move he made. Kieran felt the weight of her scrutiny, but he did not flinch. He had learned long ago that rushing or forcing respect never worked with dragons. Patience was the only way. After finishing the rig, Kieran leaned back on the sand and wiped his face. Zyra remained silent, her expression unreadable. He knew she was judging him, testing him silently as she always did. Her clan had always doubted humans, believing them too fragile, too weak, too short-lived to understand dragons. Even after 3 years of marriage he was still considered insignificant. But Kieran had never sought glory or recognition. He only wanted to live peacefully, repair what was broken, and maybe, slowly, earn her trust. That evening he prepared the small living quarters that had been assigned to him. The walls were carved from stone, with faint glowing runes that pulsed gently at night. Kieran worked to fix broken panels, adjust the ventilation, and even enhance the small cooking device. He wanted Zyra to see that humans could be careful, clever, and useful, not just small and weak. Zyra entered silently, her long tail sweeping across the floor. She observed him for a long moment before speaking. "You have been here 3 years?" she said finally. Her voice was deep and melodic, echoing slightly in the stone chamber. "And yet you have never touched me." Kieran looked up calmly. "Respect has its own form," he said simply. "I do not wish to intrude where I am not wanted." Zyra tilted her head, surprised by the quiet confidence in his tone. Most humans would have stammered or become defensive. Kieran remained steady, and she realized that this calmness was unusual, different from any human she had met before. For the next few days, Kieran continued his work, fixing broken dragon equipment and adjusting flight engines. Zyra watched him constantly, curious despite herself. Sometimes she would speak, offering instructions or corrections, but always from a distance. Kieran followed her directions carefully, never complaining, never rushing. His patience and skill began to stand out, not just to Zyra, but to other dragons who had doubted him. One afternoon, while repairing a damaged energy conduit, Kieran noticed Zyra struggling with a heavy device. Without thinking, he stepped forward and helped her lift it carefully. She glanced at him, her golden eyes wide with mild surprise. "You help me?" she asked. "I help where I can," he said simply. "It does not matter who you are. If something can be fixed, it should be fixed." Zyra studied him, her pride warring with a strange curiosity. Humans were supposed to be weak, fragile creatures. Yet here was one, steady and capable, willing to act without fear or hesitation. That evening they sat on the cliffs overlooking the glowing desert. Zyra remained silent, her tail curled around her legs. Kieran spoke softly, pointing at the distant machinery, the small settlements, and the strange creatures roaming the dunes. "I want to understand this world," he said. "And I want to understand you. Not to control you or impress you, just to learn." Zyra's expression softened slightly. It was the first sign that her distant, proud exterior might be hiding curiosity and maybe even respect. "Humans are patient," she said slowly. "Most of my clan does not believe in your kind. They think you are simple, fleeting, unworthy of trust." Kieran shrugged. "Perhaps. But I think humans can surprise even dragons. We do not have your strength, but we have patience, ingenuity, and loyalty. That matters too." Zyra considered this carefully. She had spent centuries surrounded by power and fear, but here was a small, unassuming human who did not fear her, who acted with careful thought and courage. As the twin moons rose over the desert, Kieran and Zyra sat silently, watching the glowing sands. He knew their relationship would not change overnight, but he also knew something important. Patience, respect, and quiet action could slowly build trust, even with a dragon who had never allowed anyone close. For the first time in years, Zyra felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of curiosity and perhaps admiration for the human who never demanded her attention but earned it through deeds. Kieran, on the other hand, continued quietly repairing, observing, and proving that humans, small and underestimated, could endure, adapt, and survive in ways dragons often overlooked. The silent marriage remained, but now there was a subtle shift. A bond, unspoken but growing, began forming between the dragon woman and the human mechanic. And Kieran knew deep down that with patience and courage he could finally claim not just her trust, but her respect, and maybe one day her heart. The morning sun reflected off Zyra's golden scales, making her look even more majestic than usual. Kieran adjusted the solar panels on her flying rig, careful not to touch any of the delicate components. He had spent months learning how her equipment worked, studying every lever, every gear, and every energy conduit. It was slow work, but Kieran had patience, and he knew that patience mattered more than strength in this place. Zyra watched him from a distance, her wings folded neatly behind her. She said nothing, but her golden eyes followed every move he made. 3 years of marriage had taught her one thing: humans could be clever, but few could earn her attention or trust. Kieran, however, seemed different. He did not flinch in the desert sun, did not mock her, and never rushed. He simply worked, carefully and respectfully, as if her presence demanded focus, not fear. Kieran wiped sweat from his brow and noticed Zyra staring. "The panels are almost ready," he said softly, not looking up. "Once I finish, your rig will be more stable in the wind." Zyra tilted her head. She had seen humans make mistakes, fail, or panic in the desert. Yet this one moved with calm and precision. "You care about my equipment," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I care about things that are important to you," Kieran replied simply. He did not boast, he did not seek praise. He only spoke the truth. Zyra blinked. Most dragons would have expected flattery or fear, but here was honesty and skill combined. It was unusual and it made her curious. Over the next few days, Kieran continued helping Zyra with her daily routines. He cleaned broken conduits, repaired wing harnesses, and adjusted energy regulators. Zyra observed him closely, occasionally offering instructions. "Twist the coil here," she said one afternoon, pointing at a fragile metal joint. Kieran followed exactly, careful not to rush. "You learn quickly," Zyra remarked, her tail flicking lightly. "Few humans last this long in my territory without making mistakes." Kieran smiled faintly. "I observe. I listen. That's how humans survive," he said. Zyra considered this. Her species prized power and instinct, yet this human strength was quiet, hidden in patience and cleverness. It was different but effective. One evening, a sudden windstorm swept across the desert. Zyra's rig was caught off guard, struggling to maintain stability. Without hesitation, Kieran ran forward, adjusting the panels, tightening levers, and stabilizing the equipment. Zyra's eyes widened. "You risk yourself for my machine?" she asked, her voice tinged with surprise. "I risk nothing that I do not believe is necessary," Kieran said. "This rig keeps you safe. If I can help, I will." Zyra studied him, realizing that his bravery was quiet but real. He did not seek glory, only action when it mattered. She had always judged humans by their size and fragility, but now she saw courage in another form, a human edge she had never considered. After the storm passed, they sat together on a cliff overlooking the desert. Zyra remained silent for a long moment, thinking. "You are different from others," she said finally. "Most humans would panic, run, or fail. You are patient, precise, and careful. And you do not fear me." Kieran shrugged. "I do not fear you because I do not need to. I respect you. Respect does not require fear." Zyra blinked. The way he spoke was simple, yet it carried meaning. Humans usually spoke with emotion or weakness, but he had clarity, focus, and honesty. Over time, Kieran began noticing small things about Zyra. Her favorite resting spots, the way she liked to sharpen her claws on smooth stones, the subtle patterns in her breathing when she was calm or tense. He began adjusting his work and movements according to her preferences. Zyra noticed this and it made her curious. Few had ever cared to notice her habits without judgment or mockery. One afternoon, while Kieran was repairing a small energy conduit near her living quarters, Zyra stepped closer than usual. She watched silently, her eyes narrowing in curiosity. "Why do you do this for me?" she asked softly. Kieran paused, looking up at her. "Because you are part of my life. And what is part of life should be cared for. That is how humans show trust and loyalty." Zyra tilted her head, impressed by the simplicity of his words. In the days that followed, Zyra allowed Kieran to work closer to her. She began asking questions about humans, their lives, and their ways. He answered patiently, explaining small customs, tools, and techniques that were unfamiliar to her. She realized that humans could be resourceful, adaptable, and clever in ways that dragons often overlooked. His intelligence and calm actions were as valuable as physical strength, perhaps even more so. During a quiet evening, Kieran fixed a broken wing harness for her, finishing it without a single error. Zyra looked at him, her golden eyes softening slightly. "You are skilled," she said almost admiringly. "And patient. I did not expect this from a human." Kieran smiled faintly. "You would be surprised at what humans can do if they are careful and observant." Zyra studied him for a long moment, beginning to see that patience, thoughtfulness, and quiet action were forms of strength she had never truly valued. For the first time, a subtle bond began forming between them. Zyra no longer saw Kieran as just a small human who had been forced into a strange marriage. She saw him as a partner, someone who could help, protect, and understand her world in ways few others could. And Kieran, patient and respectful, began to feel that the distant, proud dragon woman might one day trust him fully. As the twin moons rose over the desert, casting silver light across the cliffs, they sat together, silently observing the glowing sands. Words were not needed, their actions spoke louder than conversation. Trust was building, respect was forming, and the first understanding between human and dragon had begun. Kieran knew that the journey ahead would be long, but the quiet bond of patience, loyalty, and shared understanding had taken the first step toward connection. For the first time in 3 years, Zyra's heart was not completely closed, and Kieran felt that he might one day claim not just her trust, but a deeper bond as well. The desert sky was streaked with red as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the jagged cliffs. Kieran and Zyra were inspecting her flying rig when a sudden alarm blared from the main settlement. A sandstorm, larger and more dangerous than usual, was approaching fast. The winds could destroy fragile equipment, collapse shelters, and put the clan at risk. Zyra's expression hardened. She had faced storms before, but this one was different, powerful and unpredictable. Kieran stepped forward. "We need to stabilize the rig and reinforce the shelters," he said calmly. "If we act quickly, we can reduce damage." Zyra looked at him, a flicker of surprise crossing her golden eyes. Other humans in her clan had panicked in smaller storms. Kieran, however, remained steady, analyzing the situation and planning action without fear. "We will need to split tasks," Zyra said, her voice commanding. She was used to leading dragons, not humans, yet somehow she trusted him enough to take his advice. "You handle the rigs. I'll coordinate the others." Kieran nodded and got to work, examining every flying device and conduit. He repaired cracked panels, adjusted wind stabilizers, and reinforced energy cores. Each movement was precise, careful, and efficient. The storm arrived sooner than expected. Winds howled like wild beasts and sand whipped against their faces. Most dragons scrambled in panic, trying to secure equipment or guide younglings to safety. Kieran remained calm, guiding the fragile rigs through the wind and adjusting energy flows to prevent overloads. Zyra watched him closely. He moved faster and smarter than many dragons she had trained herself. His human ingenuity was saving lives and machines alike. At one point, a smaller dragon rig was blown off balance. Kieran raced forward, risking the full force of the storm, and caught it just before it collided with a cliff. Zyra's eyes widened. She had never expected a human to act with such courage. He was small, fragile in appearance, yet he moved with speed, intelligence, and bravery that many dragons lacked. The storm continued to rage, but Kieran kept his focus. He repaired broken communication lines, restored power to energy shields, and helped dragons trapped under fallen equipment. Zyra realized that his patience and quick thinking were extraordinary. Other humans might have fled or panicked or made mistakes. Kieran, however, adapted, analyzed, and acted with precision. Finally, after hours of chaos, the storm began to weaken. The desert settled into a strange quiet, dust swirling gently in the fading light. Zyra looked over the settlement, assessing the damage. Most of the rigs and shelters were intact, and the young dragons had been safely guided to hidden caves. She turned to Kieran. You saved more than equipment," she said, her voice soft but full of awe. "You saved lives." Kieran shrugged. "I only did what I could," he said simply. "You trained them well and your leadership guided the rest. I only helped where I could." Zyra studied him carefully. Humans were supposed to be fragile and short-lived, but this one had shown patience, courage, and intelligence that even older dragons could respect. As the clan began assessing the aftermath, other dragons approached Kieran. Some looked skeptical, others curious. They had mocked him for being human, for being small and seemingly weak. Now they saw a human who had stayed calm under extreme pressure, acted decisively, and protected the queen and her clan. Their murmurs of doubt slowly shifted to murmurs of respect. Zyra stood beside Kieran, her golden scales gleaming in the moonlight. "You are clever," she said softly. "Not just in thought but in action. Most dragons would have panicked. You adapted, survived, and protected the clan. That is unusual for your kind." Kieran smiled faintly. "Sometimes the smallest tools and the calmest mind can make the biggest difference," he replied. Zyra's expression softened, a small sign of acknowledgement that he had earned her respect. That night, as the clan settled in and repaired what they could, Kieran worked quietly on the rigs, checking for remaining damage. Zyra approached him, sitting near the edge of the plateau. "I saw how you handled the storm," she said. "I expected humans to falter, to fail. Yet you were steady, clever, and brave. I did not expect this." "You faced the storm too," Kieran said. "I only followed your lead when necessary. But I do not fear what I can solve. Humans survive by thinking, adapting, and staying calm. That is our edge." Zyra considered his words carefully. Her pride, her long years of experience, had always taught her that dragons were superior in strength, speed, and instinct. Yet here was a human proving that patience, intelligence, and quiet courage could match or even exceed those abilities. In the days after the storm, Zyra began allowing Kieran to assist more freely, guiding him into areas and tasks no other human would dare enter. Slowly the distance between them began to shrink. She observed how he worked, how he thought, and how he acted without fear or selfishness. Her curiosity and admiration grew, and she began to speak with him more openly, though still cautiously. By the end of the week, the clan recognized Kieran's contribution. Whispers no longer mocked the human mechanic, they respected him. Zyra watched quietly, realizing that this human, small and underestimated, had done what many dragons could not: save lives, maintain order, and act with honor and intelligence under extreme pressure. As the twin moons rose again over the desert, Kieran and Zyra stood side by side on a cliff. The rigs below glimmered in the moonlight, stable and ready. Zyra looked at him, her golden eyes reflecting faint warmth. "You have proven yourself," she said softly. "Perhaps humans are more capable than I believed." Kieran nodded, careful not to overstep. "We can surprise others," he said simply. "Strength is not always about size or power. Sometimes it is about courage, patience, and cleverness." Zyra considered his words. For the first time she saw him not just as a small human in a strange marriage, but as a partner. Someone who could think, act, and survive alongside her. The storm had tested them both, and Kieran had passed. The quiet respect between dragon and human had grown, and a new understanding was beginning to form. A bond forged in courage, intelligence, and patience. For the first time, the long years of silent marriage felt like they could lead to something more. A connection built not by force or ceremony but by deeds and trust. The desert was calm now, the wind brushing softly across the red cliffs. Kieran worked on Zyra's flying rig, carefully adjusting the energy conduits and tightening loose panels. He had grown used to the rhythm of her territory, the way she moved, and the patterns of her clan. Zyra watched silently, folding her wings neatly behind her back. Her golden eyes followed him closely, but there was no judgment this time, only quiet observation. Kieran paused to wipe the sweat from his brow. "The rig will be fully stabilized by nightfall," he said softly. Zyra tilted her head. She had grown curious about the human who never rushed, never panicked, and never demanded attention. Instead, he worked with patience, focus, and care, earning trust not by force but by action. "You understand more than I expected," Zyra said quietly, stepping closer than usual. "Most humans fail to notice the details, the rhythm of my work. You notice everything." Kieran smiled faintly. "I observe. That is how humans survive. We learn from what we see and we act carefully." Zyra considered this, intrigued by his quiet intelligence. That evening, a small accident occurred. A damaged flight panel had loosened, and a minor energy surge sparked near Zyra's rig. Without hesitation, Kieran lunged forward, adjusting the panel and redirecting the energy flow. Zyra's eyes widened. Most dragons would have acted instinctively, relying on raw strength, but Kieran moved with thought, precision, and calm. "You save more than equipment," she said softly afterward. "You save lives." Kieran shook his head. "I only do what I can. You lead the clan well. I just assist where needed." Zyra studied him carefully. She realized that strength came in many forms, not only through wings, claws, or fire but through thought, patience, and courage. Over the following days, Zyra began allowing Kieran into her personal routines. He helped her clean and maintain armor plates, adjust wing harnesses, and repair old communication devices. She noticed that he observed every detail, the way she liked her harness straps, how she preferred energy conduits connected, and even subtle gestures in her body language. Zyra was impressed. Few dragons had ever taken such care to understand her needs so completely. One afternoon, Zyra asked him a question she had never voiced before. "Why do you stay with me, human? After all these years you could leave." Kieran paused, looking at her calmly. "Because respect and loyalty matter. You are my partner in this life. I do not leave what I can protect or improve. That is how humans show commitment." Zyra blinked. His words were simple, yet carried meaning. Humans, she thought, were unpredictable, but Kieran's consistency and honesty were rare. They spent the next few days together, repairing old flying rigs that had been abandoned for decades. Zyra spoke more often now, asking questions about human technology and customs. Kieran explained simply, never boasting, never rushing. He taught her a few small modifications to her devices that increased stability and efficiency. Zyra watched him, impressed by his cleverness. One evening, while they rested on a cliff overlooking the glowing desert, Zyra spoke quietly. "I have underestimated humans," she admitted. "I thought your kind was weak, short-lived, and unworthy of trust. Yet you surprise me." Kieran smiled faintly. "Humans survive by thinking, observing, and adapting. That is our edge." Zyra nodded slowly. She began to see him not just as a small human, but as someone capable of understanding, adapting, and even protecting a dragon like her. The bond between them grew stronger as Kieran continued to act without expectation. He repaired broken equipment, guided young dragons in flight training, and helped calm the clan during minor disputes. Zyra began to notice small details she had never shared before. Her favorite resting spots, the paths she preferred when flying, and the patterns in her breathing when she was tense. Kieran remembered each detail, adjusting his actions accordingly. "Humans are patient," Zyra said one night, her tail curled around her legs as they watched the twin moons rise. "Most dragons would have acted with pride, strength, or instinct. You act differently. And it works." Kieran nodded. "Sometimes the quiet way is stronger than the loud way. We do not have fire or wings, but we can solve problems, adapt, and survive. That is our edge." Zyra considered his words carefully, realizing that his patient intelligence had earned her respect, curiosity, and trust. One morning, a small dragon hatchling became stuck on a cliff ledge. The adults panicked, unsure how to reach it safely. Kieran calmly assessed the situation, creating a simple pulley system from ropes and energy conduits. He guided the young dragon to safety step by step. Zyra watched in awe. The human's cleverness, combined with patience and calm action, had solved a problem that even dragons found difficult. "Perhaps humans are underestimated," Zyra admitted, her golden eyes meeting his. "Your cleverness, patience, and courage, they are remarkable." Kieran shrugged. "We do what we can. That is all." Zyra smiled faintly. For the first time, her pride softened, replaced by genuine admiration. She realized that Kieran was no ordinary human. He was capable of earning trust, respect, and even a bond stronger than many dragons' instinctive alliances. By the time the twin moons were high in the sky, Zyra allowed Kieran to sit beside her on the cliff. Words were few, but their actions spoke volumes. Trust had been built through patience and shared experience. Respect had grown through courage and intelligence. And a quiet bond, subtle but real, had begun to form. A bond that might one day lead to something more than silent marriage, toward a true partnership of equals. The desert stretched below them, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Zyra's wings twitched slightly, no longer tense or defensive. Kieran's hands worked calmly on a small repair, yet he was fully aware of her presence. In that quiet moment, the long years of distance began to shrink. Understanding, respect, and trust had taken root. And Kieran knew that the next step in their journey would bring them even closer, toward the true bond of partnership, courage, and perhaps, love. The desert was quiet under the early morning sun, the sand glowing gold as Kieran worked on Zyra's flying rig. Today felt different. 4 months he had been earning her trust, repairing broken devices, adjusting energy conduits, and learning her habits. Zyra observed him closely, her golden eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and quiet approval. The distance that had existed between them for 3 years was shrinking. A sudden alarm rang from the settlement. A band of rogue sky raiders was approaching, their ships small but fast and equipped with energy disruptors. Zyra's clan tensed immediately. Most dragons relied on instinct and strength to confront threats, but Kieran calmly assessed the situation, scanning the energy readings and wind patterns. "We can handle this," Kieran said softly. "If we work together we can protect the clan without unnecessary risk." Zyra looked at him, surprised. Other humans would panic, but he spoke with confidence, strategy, and calmness. She realized that the human beside her was not just clever, he was indispensable. Kieran quickly directed the clan. He assigned dragons to defensive positions, instructed them on flight patterns to avoid the disruptors, and even suggested modifications to their rigs that could improve stability. Zyra followed his lead, guiding the larger dragons and trusting his knowledge. It was the first time she had allowed a human to have such influence over clan strategy. As the raiders arrived, chaos erupted in the sky. Lightning from energy disruptors crackled across the air, forcing dragons to twist and dodge mid-flight. Kieran moved among the rigs, adjusting controls, guiding dragons to safer routes and stabilizing energy flows. His calm precision allowed dragons to avoid damage and maintain formation. Zyra was impressed. A human, small and underestimated, was managing what even dragons struggled to coordinate. One raider ship fired a pulse at a young dragon struggling to maneuver. Without hesitation, Kieran activated a deflector shield he had modified, protecting the hatchling. Zyra's eyes widened. You saved it," she said, astonished. Kieran shook his head. "I only acted on what I could do. The young must survive." Zyra realized that courage and intelligence, combined with patience, gave humans an edge dragons often ignored. The battle continued, but Kieran's ingenuity turned the tide. Using simple but clever modifications to their rigs, he created energy channels that redirected the disruptors' pulses harmlessly into the desert sand. The raiders faltered, confused by the unexpected defense, and eventually retreated. Zyra watched silently, feeling a deep respect for the human beside her. When the last raider ship disappeared over the horizon, the clan descended to the desert floor. Damage was minimal and no dragons were lost. Zyra approached Kieran, her golden eyes bright with emotion. You have proven yourself," she said. "In every way you have shown courage, intelligence and skill that most dragons cannot match. You earned your place beside me." Kieran smiled faintly. "I only did what humans do best: adapt, think and act when needed. Strength is not only in wings or fire. Sometimes it is patience, observation and clever action." Zyra nodded slowly. She had spent centuries relying on instinct and power, but Kieran had shown her a new form of strength, the human edge. Over the next few days, Zyra allowed Kieran to assist more directly in clan matters. He repaired rigs, optimized flight paths, and even taught young dragons a few techniques for controlling their energy more efficiently. Each day their bond grew stronger. Kieran's calm patience and intelligence had earned not only Zyra's respect but also her trust. One evening as the twin moons rose over the desert, Zyra approached Kieran. She lowered her wings slightly, a rare gesture of openness. "I have been distant for too long," she admitted softly. 3 years of silence, yet you persisted. You did not rush, did not demand, and yet you have earned my trust and admiration." Kieran looked at her calmly. "I acted as any human would. Respect, loyalty, and patience matter more than force or pride." Zyra studied him for a long moment. She had seen the strength of humans in action now, their ability to think and adapt, to act with courage even when small or underestimated. Slowly she extended her clawed hand toward him. Kieran took it gently. For the first time the barrier between them vanished. "I accept you," Zyra said quietly. "Not because of ceremony but because of your deeds, your patience and your courage. You have earned not only trust but partnership. You are my equal, Kieran." Kieran smiled softly. "And you are mine, Zyra. Together we will face any challenge as equals, as partners." From that moment, the long years of silent marriage became a story of respect, trust, and partnership. The clan watched in awe as the human mechanic and the dragon queen worked side by side, repairing rigs, managing the territory and guiding young dragons. Kieran's cleverness, patience, and courage had earned him a place no other human had, beside the dragon woman he had quietly admired and respected. The desert winds blew softly, carrying the scent of sand and fire. Zyra's wings shimmered in the moonlight, and Kieran adjusted the rigs with careful hands. They moved together seamlessly, a team built on trust, respect, and shared experience. The galaxy, once doubtful of humans, would learn that small, underestimated beings could achieve great things through intelligence, courage and perseverance. For Zyra, the proud dragon queen, the human beside her had proven that love, trust and partnership could be built through action, patience and respect. And for Kieran, the quiet mechanic, the long years of effort, observation and patience had finally borne fruit. He had claimed not only his wife's trust but her partnership, and together they had shown the true human edge, courage, intelligence and the power to change even the mightiest of worlds. The twin moons reflected on the desert sands as they worked, side by side, ready to face any challenge together. In that quiet triumph, the long silence of 3 years ended, replaced by partnership, trust, and the unspoken understanding that humans, though small, had an edge the galaxy could not ignore.